Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Chilltown Hoops. I'm your host, Jermaine. The youngsters call me OG. My friends call me J-Dub. Let's get to it. So, the Golden State Warriors are NBA champs, as we all know. And now the chatter starts about Curry being a top 10 player all time. I had him already in the top 15. I have since moved him up from 14 to 12. I have moved him ahead of Jerry West and Oscar Robertson. I had those two guys ahead of him previously, but I have since moved him up ahead of those guys. But the question that needed to be answered for me was, in your top 10, who gets moved if Curry is now a top 10 player? And why does Curry become a top 10 player? Well, it can't be because of just championships, because that circumstance is a little bit different. And the reason why that circumstance is a little bit different, because the guys that I have in my top 10, for example, are James, Jordan, Jabbar, Chamberlain, Russell, Magic, Bird, Duncan, Olajuwon, Diesel. So, when you talk about championships, you talk about an iconic team. You talk about a team that was the best team in the NBA, and they were able to do it under ridiculous circumstances. They didn't just walk to the NBA championship, and if they did, they were phenomenal at doing that. So, when I think about Steph Curry and being a four-time NBA champion, well, championships factor in, but there are other things that factor in as well when you talk about championships. Well, what role did you play on that championship team? Well, Steph Curry was the best player in the championship series. And that was my only argument with him. I'd like to see him be the best player in the championship series. And he now is, which now has him moved ahead of Oscar Robertson and Jerry West. And I got no problem with that. But when I think about the other guys in championship series that I have him ahead of, like, for example, the finals MVP didn't come out until 1969. So, I mean, Chamberlain won it in 72, and that's largely due to the fact that the finals MVP only came out in 69. So, Magic was the finals MVP 3 times, and he was the best player in the championship series 2 of those 3 times. Bird was the best player in the championship series twice. I'm willing to say that he was the best player in 3 championship series. He was a better player than Cedric Maxwell, but Cedric Maxwell won the finals MVP. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Andre Iguodala was the best player in the championship series. Steph Curry wasn't the best player in that championship series neither. LeBron James was the best player in that championship series. Curry was the best player on his championship team. I can get with that logic, sure. But when I think about being the best player in the championship series, that's what I'm talking about. So when you get to things like that, then you have to put other things into play when those things are close. So if I'm debating whether or not Steph Curry is better than Magic, well, Magic was the best player in 2 championship series. He was the finals MVP 3 times. He wasn't the best player in that championship series in 80. That was Jabbar. Jabbar was the best player in that 1980 championship series. Magic just won the finals MVP because of what he did in Game 6. But he was the best player in the championship series in 82 and in 87. All right. So with that being said, what differentiates those two now? Well, Magic was a 3-time league MVP. In fact, he won the league MVP 3 times in 4 years. Steph Curry won it back-to-back years. Magic being the iconic figure that he is. Curry is an iconic figure. Curry changed the game. Magic also changed the game. Magic being the 6'9" point guard that we had never seen in NBA history. And I haven't seen anybody do it as good as him since he retired. And he retired in 1991 for me. So I was the best player at my position. I was that guy from day one when I walked in the door. From day one when I walked in the door until I retired in 1991, I was the dude. Same thing with Larry Bird. I was that guy from day one. From the minute I walked through the door, first team All-NBA in year one. And not only was I first team All-NBA in year one, for the next decade, I was first team All-NBA 9 times in 10 years. Now, him and Curry basically have the same timeline, where they both played, at this point, Steph Curry just finished his 13th year. Larry Bird played 13 years. Well, Steph Curry, in the 13 years that he played, he didn't become an All-NBA performer until year 5, which means that if his career ended today, he spent almost half of his career not being an elite player. Bird was an elite player right from the beginning, and he stayed an elite player the entire time. His MVPs are still unmatched. 3 straight. There hasn't been a guy who did that before him, and there hasn't been a guy who's done that since him. James won it 4 times in 5 years. Giannis won it twice in 3 years. Steph Curry won it in back-to-back seasons. Bird did it 3 times. Now, that puts him in a different category. A completely different category. In terms of his clutchness, Bird was the best player in the championship series twice. I'm sorry, Bird was the best player in the championship series 3 times. Even though Cedric Maxwell won the finals MVP, Bird was the best player in that series. He had an 8-point game. He had another 8-point game. He averaged 17 and almost 17 and 6 for the series. Now the top 5 guys, I don't think that moves, because I personally don't think that for you to get into the top 5, you have to be what these guys were for as long as they were. So James, Jordan, Jabbar, Chamberlain, Russell. So these guys were those dudes right from the beginning, and they stayed those dudes for the entire time they were in the league. Chamberlain has records that still stand to this day. Every major record in NBA history has Chamberlain's name on it, or he held it at one point. And that's still going on today. The all-time leading scorer in NBA history, points per game. That's Jordan. That was eclipsed by Jordan, it was Chamberlain before Jordan. Chamberlain has more rebounds, because you guys talk about Steph Curry as a scorer. Chamberlain has more rebounds than Steph Curry has points. Now, he was playing against smaller guys. Well, Nate Thurman was 6'11", Walt Bellamy was 6'11", Bill Russell was 6'9". There were big guys going on. Not add that to the fact that in the league today, the average height is 6'6". Back then, it was 6'5". What I don't do is I don't fault a guy. So I don't fault Shaq for being bigger, faster, and stronger than Olajuwon, than David Robinson, than Patrick Ewing, than Dikembe Mutombo, than Alonzo Mourning. I don't fault him for that. That's not his fault. That is not his fault that he was bigger, faster, stronger than all of those guys. So I'm not going to fault Chamberlain for being bigger, faster, stronger, and outperforming all of those guys. I'm not going to fault him for that. Absolutely not. Bill Russell is the winningest player in NBA history. And you can argue that he's the winningest player in pro sports. You got guys like Michael Phelps, Mark Spitz, guys like that who have an argument for that. But when you talk about pro basketball, he was the best player. He was the most important player on every championship team that he was on. Those teams that he was on, they were winning, but before he got there, they didn't win it. When he got there, he was the difference on every one of those championship teams. And he still holds records today that haven't been broken. And he retired over 50 years ago. So he still holds the record for a Game 7 performance in NBA history. He had 30 points and 40 boards. I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the cheap seats. He still holds the record for the most points and rebounds in a Game 7 in NBA history. He had 30 points and 40 boards. We all know who Jordan is. We all know who James is. We all know who Jabbar is. Jabbar was the best player in high school. He was the best player in college. He was the best player in the pros. And he was that for a long time. Same thing with Jordan. Jordan wasn't the best player in high school, but Jordan was definitely a top 25 player. James was the best player in high school. Jordan was the best player in college at one point. And he was the best player in the NBA for a long time. Same idea with James. So when you talk about being the best to ever do it, longevity matters, man. Longevity absolutely matters. Now, the good thing about Curry is that this thing isn't over, right? This thing is not over. He's still playing. And I still think that him playing at this level, he can play at this level for another 2-3 years before he segues himself into a Ray Allen role when he starts to slow down and just become a long ball. I still think that he could be a starter, but be a long ball shooter. No doubt about it. Be a long ball shooter like Ray Allen was and be solid and play another 2-3 years after that. After he starts to slow down and segue into that Ray Allen role, and he'll play another 2-3 years. So I think Curry, barring any injuries, which was a problem early on in his career, it hasn't been a problem as of late. However, he is 34 years old. He'll be 35 next year. I will say that, barring any injuries, I don't see why he can't play at this level for another 2-3 years and then segue into a Ray Allen role. And then play another 2-3 years. So I'm thinking another 5-6 more years. That's why I don't think that his three-point record will be, I don't think it'll be touched. I think that before his career is over, he'll be close to 5,000 long balls, and I don't think I'm gonna see that again in my lifetime. I just don't. I'm having a difficult time with that. Now back to the other guys that I mentioned. Duncan was the best player in the championship series. Hakeem Olajuwon holds. When you talk about a guy in Hakeem Olajuwon, Steph Curry had a top 5 season all time. Olajuwon had maybe the best season in NBA history. And he still holds the record. Not holds the record, I take that back. He still is two of the 6 best scoring outputs in playoff history were Olajuwon. He's got a 10-year career where he went 24, 12, and 4 blocks. And that production went up in the playoffs. Led the playoffs in scoring 3 times. Made the All-NBA team 12 times. I mean, I can go on and on about Olajuwon. On and on about Olajuwon. That, like I said, that when you talk about Shaquille O'Neal, being the Finals MVP 3 straight years, being the best player in the championship series 3 straight years, man. Not 3 years throughout the course of your career. 3 straight years being the best player in the championship series. That's pretty incredible, man. That's pretty incredible. And to have a top 5 season also, the 1999-2000 season that Shaq had, I think that was a top 5 season all time. He finished 1 vote short of being the unanimous league MVP. He finished 2nd that year in Defensive Player of the Year. Shaq just wasn't as consistent as we'd like for him to be as a defensive player, but he was definitely elite at one point as a defender. Definitely was. So when I talk about the top 10, when I talk about my top 10, I'm having a difficult time with Curry breaking into that. I mean, when I think about Bryant at 11, who's right on the other side of the door of the top 10. When I think about Bryant and what he meant to the game, how good he was, how elite he was on both sides of the basketball, and how he was the best player at his position, and how he was the best player in the championship series, and how he basically has 2 Hall of Fame careers. Number 8 had a Hall of Fame career, and number 24 had a Hall of Fame career. Like I said, the plus side to Curry is he's still playing. So this thing isn't over. I'm just because I don't think he's a top 10 player now doesn't mean that he won't eventually be. Because his career, just like Giannis is still playing. So I'm not ready to put him in. I'm not ready to put Giannis there yet. But if Giannis can continue to do what he's doing, there's no reason. From a talent standpoint, I don't think it's a question. But he still has to produce more, which is what I go back to when I say that I don't differentiate between great player and I don't differentiate between great player and stats. Not just stats, but achievements. I don't differentiate between the two. Those two go hand in hand. You being a great player and what you did are both hand in hand. I care about that. I don't care that you were just awesome as a player. What did you produce? Your skill set is great. Your talent is great. Absolutely. But But I don't differentiate that between that and achievements. I care about both of those. I put both of those things together. So this thing isn't over for Curry. I think Curry is still on his way, and that's the plus side to this, the fact that he's still playing. So the fact that I don't have him as a top 10 player right now doesn't mean that he won't eventually be. So, all right, guys, like I said, I'll be here for as long as you want me to be here, and we'll keep doing this for as long as you want me around. But until then, take it light, but take it.